David here with Figboot on Pens. It's been a while since I've done an ink review, and I have a number of them that I need to get to, so you might just be seeing an abundance of them over the next couple of months. To get back into the swing of things in regard to ink reviews, I thought that I would begin with something I feel is rather special. A company that's relatively new to the ink game called Colorverse. And for an ink review, I will admit that I spend a lot of times talking about things that aren't necessarily related to ink, but there's a lot of really interesting things to cover when it comes to this new company, and a lot of things that I found interesting that I just couldn't leave out. There's a lot of intrigue and a bit of mystery about this brand and ink. They really came strong out of nowhere. And I was fortunate to be able to get some info directly from the company that I feel can shed some light on what this company is and where they came from and what some of their goals are. So I appreciate your patience while I review kind of a large amount of information, but I promise you I will eventually actually show you an ink. Actually, two inks. Colorverse is a company based out of South Korea and is the brainchild of a Mr. Young-Ki Baek. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mr. Baek had worked for more than a decade at a company that imports and distributes stationery brands from around the world. He'd been a brand manager in Korea for companies like Parker and Waterman and Moleskine and other well-known brands. So he was familiar with the market and could see a potential for a line of ink. He took over an ink manufacturing company, which had been in business for over 20 years, and created the company by the name of Plan B. That's PLNBEE. The company is actually a combination of words, as well as having a double meaning. It's the combination of the word plan, and they want to plan ahead all the time and maintain their corporate value and fulfill the needs of their customers. And BEE, because they want to achieve good results by connecting good products to their customers, just like honeybees do by pollinating between flowers. So you combine those words into Plan B. The double meaning is that as a company, not only do they want to have a Plan A, but they also want to prepare for a Plan B. But not long after they started the company, the Colorverse line of inks were launched. Something that really impressed me about this company was their overall branding. This is what the package looks like. We'll take a closer look at it in a bit. But for a relatively small company with their first major product, they really hit the ground running and produced something very special. You don't look at any of their packaging and think to yourself that, hey, this company is just starting out. It looks like they've been around for years, which is really remarkable. There have been 3 seasons of Colorverse ink released, each with a slightly different universal theme. The company has said that in the East, humans are referred to as the little universe. So in a way, they want Colorverse to feel, as a brand, feel like it's talking about each and every one of us. Season 1 was called Spaceward and had colors named after elements of outer space like Mars Curiosity and Morning Star. Season 2 was called Astrophysics and contained colors such as like black hole and dark energy. And then Season 3 is called Multiverse, and it consists of 6 different inks, or 6 different products, we'll say, each containing 2 complementary colors of ink. And it's one of those inks that I'll be showing you today. The one I have to show you is Schrödinger and Cat. So, in order to learn more about Mr. Schrödinger and his cat, as well as checking out some of the inks, let's go over here to camera 2. Okay, in regard to most pens and ink, the boxes are virtually disposable. They really don't add much to the product, but that is not the case here for Colorverse. Their boxes have a very high cool factor. Here on the box, you can see that this is Season 3, and that the season is called the Multiverse. And we have a green ink here called Schrödinger, and a blue glistening ink called Cat. When you first open this box, I just like the little details that are going on here on the side of the box. There's just some attention to detail about this entire packaging that I like. I mean, someone spent some time designing this, and there was some thought put into it. First, we have a little insert that actually shows the different colors for the entire season here. And then we have a little goodie bag, and this is just amazing. There are some, let's see, let's take everything out of the goodie bag. There are some stickers here that you could use for ink samples, or if you should just have, transfer this ink to a different bottle. It has stickers for each of the inks for the season, so I thought that was really helpful. Then they have a bookmark here that you could pop out, and then they also have a couple of napkins, which I think you could use to wipe off the nib. And they even have a little pen stand here. So let me pop this out here. And it's a little pen stand that you can put together, and it sits down. Now, I don't know how useful this little pen stand is. I was having trouble having it work earlier, but there, it actually works. But, I don't know how useful it actually is, but I kind of think it's cool that they included it. Then we have a little top shelf, and on this little top shelf here, you can see a design of all these constellations, and then you actually remove this, and inside there is some ink. And you can see that there's two bottles. Here is the larger bottle, which is a 60 milliliter bottle of Schrödinger, the green ink. And then we have the smaller bottle here, which is this is just the cutest little bottle. It is a 15 milliliter bottle of ink called Cat, which is a glistening blue ink. I really like the shape and design of these bottles. Just one second, let me get that out of the way. The shape and design of these bottles are really interesting. On the 60 milliliter bottle, the opening is plenty wide enough so you can get just about any nib in your collection in here. The opening on the smaller 15 milliliter bottle is considerably smaller. I have many pens in my collection that won't fit into this opening. And also, since the bottle is a little smaller, it won't take long before the level is so much that it will be difficult to get a fill out of here, even on a nib that you can get into the opening. So I have a feeling after a few fills, it'll be more practical to transfer this small bottle into some vials or another bottle, but it is an incredibly cute bottle. The company has said that they included the smaller bottles to make it easier for folks to share and trade inks with one another. In seasons 1 and 2, the larger and smaller bottles each contained the same color, so that made sense. They've said in the future they might actually make empty small bottles available for purchase in order for folks to share inks. So, okay. That's a lot of information about the company, packaging, and other stuff. So how about we actually take a look at some inks? Let me actually clear off my area here for a second. Okay. Here we have Colorverse Schrödinger. The ink here uses that it uses some natural ingredients rather than some highly molecular synthetic materials. So the inks really won't have that much of a chemical odor. For this header and passes here, I used a Pilot Parallel with a 2.4 millimeter nib. Schrödinger is a nice darker ivy green. It's a fairly wet ink. And over here, I laid this ink on pretty thick. And then below, I kind of did a single swab and then pulled it over. And that you can see here on the back that even though I laid it on pretty heavy, that there really is no bleed through at all. Speaking of laying it on rather heavy, while I was writing this review, I had a little accident with my bottle of Schrödinger. An incident, if you will. I had never before tipped over a bottle of ink, but that streak just ended. And here's what it looked like right after I spilt half the bottle. Now, that's the kind of pen geek that I am. I spill ink all over my desk, my lap, and the floor, and the first thing that I reach for is my camera to take a picture of the carnage. I thought it kind of looked like a frog. But here's actually what the paper looks like now. I know it's not, you can't see it all in the frame, but this is what it dried to be. And that even though this accident happened 4 days ago, parts of the page are still a bit sticky and damp. There was a bit of bleed through, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect a paper to put up with that kind of abuse. But, I actually think it does look rather pretty here. It's a nice bit of abstract art, if I might say so myself. It's almost suitable for framing. Now, this is Rhodia paper, and that here is what a healthy amount looks like on some Tomoe River paper. There was a little bleed through, but again, I put a large amount of ink on here, so that's to be expected. And that here again is Schrödinger, and this is what it looks like in comparison to some other inks. This is what it looks like in regard to Noodler's Forest Green. It's kind of similar to that, as well as Roaring Klingner Verdura. And then here's what it looks like with Mont Blanc Irish Green, which is actually one of my favorite greens. And then here it is with Monteverde Green. Okay, now in regard to some writing. To begin with, we have a Sailor Pro Color Stardust. And so this is a Sailor Pro Color Stardust. And this one is a fine nib. And even though it's a fine nib, I still think that the green has some decent amount of color to it, and you get a good feeling of the color. So next up, we have a medium nib, but the medium nib I chose is a little bit on the odd side. This is the Pelikan M1000. Now, the nib size on the Pelikan M1000s are a bit odd. This is a medium, but for most other pens, it would almost be more of a double broad. It's a very wide medium. So we have here the Pelikan M1000. And this is a medium nib. I just thought that it would look nice with the green stripe, that this is a good match for this pen. And then finally, we have a Nemosine Singularity, which is actually a 1.1 millimeter stub. So we have a Nemosine Singularity. And this is a 1.1 stub. So I find this ink to be fairly wet, as you can see here by the drying times. That even with a rather fine nib, at 15 seconds, I was still able to get a bit of a smudge out of here. And with this medium, like I said, the Pelikan really doesn't have a typical medium-sized nib, so the longer drying time is understandable. Okay, before we get to the other ink, I think it's time for a little explanation. In the past, I've done little mini movie overviews with my ink reviews, but for this ink, I felt it was appropriate to do something a little bit different. I wanted to give a quick lesson on who Schrödinger was and why his cat was important. Erwin Schrödinger was an Austrian physicist who came up with a kind of a quantum mechanics scenario, a thought problem, if you will, that presents a scenario where a cat may be simultaneously both alive and dead. Now, how is that possible? Let me show you. Well, in his theoretical scenario, there is a sealed box. And that you cannot see into that box. And that in that box you have a device with a hammer, and you have some poison, and you have a cat. The contraption with the hammer has exactly a 50% chance to break the bottle. Maybe it will, maybe you won't. It's an equal chance. If it does break the bottle, then what happens is the poison is released, and the cat is no longer of this world. Or maybe it's like this. Yeah, that no longer of this world. And it was Schrödinger's contention that after some time, while the box is still sealed, you have no idea what's about to happen inside or what has happened inside. So there is a 50% chance that this cat is alive and a 50% chance that this cat is dead. And that it's his contention that it's not until you actually look inside the box and see that it is either dead or alive that the cat actually assumes that state. And that multiple realities collapse into one possibility or another. So that's how the cat can be both dead and alive at the same time. And just to be clear, this is a theoretical scenario. To the best of my knowledge, Schrödinger didn't go around killing cats, at least as far as I know. Okay, speaking of cat, let's check out the cat ink. It's a nice blue, and that this writing right here is with a TWSBI Mini that has a fine nib. And that you can see here that the ink does have a fair amount of sheen when applied rather thick. And I feel it's appropriately described because it does have a small amount of glistening, but not something that I would really describe as a full-on shimmer. That here is what cat looks like in regard to the Tomoe River paper. Again, it has a little bit of glistening and a little bit of shading, but I did put it on here rather thick. And there was just a tiny bit of bleed through. That isn't bleed through, that was just basically something from the other side that got on there. Then in regard to some color comparisons, this is what cat looks like. And that it's kind of a nice deep blue. Here it is in comparison to Noodler's Liberty Elysium. And here it is with Omos blue. And then here it is with the Visconti blue. And then here it is with a Farney's American blue, which are all kind of deep, solid blues, which I feel the Colorverse cat is. Okay, let's do a little water test on Schrödinger. So I just have some water here in this syringe, and I will go ahead and drop some water over here, and we'll just let it sit for a second. That while this sits, let's check out some chromatography. First, we have Schrödinger. And you can see here that it's just like you've learned ever since your days in early school, that green separates out into two colors, yellow and blue. It takes a little while to get started, but I think it's kind of cool to see it separate out like that. The way that the blue creeps up is kind of cool and separates out from the green. And next up is cat. Now, cat is more of a straightforward blue ink, which really no undertones to speak of. The coolest thing about this time lapse to me was kind of watching the ink swirl around in the cup. But like I said, you can see here that there really isn't much in the way of other color elements to this particular ink. It's pretty much just blue. And then here is what those color strips look like. This is what the blue ended up looking like, and then this is what the Schrödinger ended up looking like. And that I still think it's kind of cool to see the colors separate out so drastically like that. Okay, it's time to wipe this off. And I wouldn't necessarily, well, there's some remnants there of yellow. I would not necessarily say that this is a waterproof ink. It seems like the yellow sticks around for a little bit longer, but I wouldn't necessarily categorize this as a waterproof ink. So that is Colorverse, Schrödinger, and cat. I do like here that on the smaller bottle that the cat on the smaller bottle is smiling and is still alive. So he cheated death. Or maybe this picture was taken before the experiment took place. Colorverse inks retail for around $35 to $36 and are being carried by an increasing number of retailers. The company did tell me that they plan to continue the science and space themes for their upcoming seasons. Colorverse actually plans to announce the colors for season 4 at a stationery show in Japan this July. So look for more information about next season coming up around then. I believe they already have planned out through season 6, so I'm anxious to see what what they're coming out with next from this very interesting company that has produced some high quality and well-performing inks. Okay, that was a lot for an ink review. But like I mentioned before, look for a number of other ink reviews coming up in the somewhat near future. I have 3 or 4 that I needed to get to, so we might be seeing more of those coming up soon. So until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.